everybody. Today I'd like to show off some interesting finds I found at a local library sale type thing. Not exactly sure the origin, but I know a lot of these books come from Austin, I believe. So let's get started. I got a box here. Okay. And I will try to show the title while I talk about it. So this book here, a little dusty, and mind you, these books are a little dusty. I do apologize for that. But yes, so this book, it is a biography of Heinrich Heine, the famous German poet and philosopher. And the institution allegedly this comes from is Concordia College, the Hershey Library, SCHI. It's by Jeffrey Simmons. For some reason, in English, Heine is not as popular, anymore compared to like the Germans, and I think he's read a lot in French. But for some reason, his appeal in the 21st century doesn't seem to have kept up. Unlike, say, someone like Franz Kafka or even Goethe, somebody like that. So it's kind of interesting, but definitely his work is very good to check out if you're interested in German poetry, I believe from the 18th century. So interesting book. This one is a history of German literature. Ironic, I just spoke about it. And so this is kind of like one of those surveys you would get from, if you wanted to study like the overall development from the Enlightenment to the Romanticism period, the rise of nationhood and the conscientious of the intellectuals, and then to our modern day. This one is by Calvin Thomas, LLD, which means so he's a lawyer. It's pretty interesting. Good stuff. A lot of these books I got were literature. So if that's your thing. I got a history of French literature by, Cazamian. And this kind of goes with the same type of topic. And this one was checked out quite a bit, as you can see. So, pretty cool. Good stuff. Okay. I got classic Persian literature, I believe. I believe it's Persian. It is, and I do apologize in advance for this pronunciation, Farid Din Attar. So, and it is the Conference of the Birds, and it's pretty interesting. It might be Arabic literature, but very interesting. Just folk tales talking about poetry of like the different events. It talks about how the birds of the world gathered together, and they were looking for a king of sorts. So it's very interesting. This idea of gathering people together for a common goal, of course, is very famous. I mean, one could instantly think of the Lord of the Rings. The hobbits gathering together and so forth to go find, and stop the Eye of Sauron and Mordor and all that. But very interesting stuff. Persian Arabic literature is very interesting. And so the next book I have here is actually a 2-volume set by a French, I believe his name is Lefebvre, and it is the history of the French Revolution. I do believe this gentleman, he was prominent in French historiography of the French Revolution from the Marxist perspective. So he's going to focus on a bottom to top kind of look at the revolution instead of a top to bottom. So very interesting viewpoint. Okay. Let's see. Treason and Roman and Germanic Law by Lear. I believe this is a fairly classic book. Not entirely familiar with the contents, but this is going to talk about how the law changed and was enforced in the Roman Republic and probably the Empire as well, and how laws very much changed. For example, it was very common for, you weren't supposed to openly take bribes if you were a public official in the Roman Republic, but then it was kind of like, it was expected you were going to take bribes, you just couldn't officially acknowledge it. And the Romans ideally would not start a unjust war That was their idea. So they always set motions into play or were dragged into things, in their opinion, that is, in which they could justify, oh, well, we're defending our Roman citizens. And so this is probably going to refer a lot to that. Of course, as the Roman Republic falls and then you get the empire, you get a more reliance on German mercenaries and, well, what would become German mercenaries and other groups, simply because, you know, a lot of Roman citizens became less interested in the military because it wasn't the only avenue to success after the age of Augustus and so forth, especially by the time of Antoninus Pius in the 160s, 170s. Especially, what's very interesting about that, without getting too far into it, is that they had the Antoninian Plague, and that wiped out a lot of the population, and so they had a hard time even putting together a couple legions in order to fight their enemies, especially the Parthenids. So, very interesting stuff. Anything on Rome is usually good if you like history. This is kind of an interesting book. It is, now, I don't read Hebrew, but I thought it was very interesting. It's called a Shiloh prayer book. And let me see if there's any sort of... Okay, so it's printed this way, right to left. And so a lot of books in the U.S., for some background, they were printed in New York because there's a large Jewish population and people who were also interested, in addition to Orthodox faiths and so forth. So a lot of stuff was from earlier in the century, 20th century, would be printed in New York. So I think it's very nice looking book. This was really cool. I found a Lithuanian dictionary, which, if you're not into languages, finding stuff in the Baltics when you don't live in that area is actually pretty tough. In fact, you might have a better chance finding it in German. So I finally have a dictionary in Lithuanian, which is awesome because I have a dictionary in Latvian and Estonian, and so this kind of like completes the set of that. So very interesting. It's worth some money too, but I bought it for my collection. I got a book about Angkor Wat, largest Buddhist establishment in the world. Very interesting. I'm sure this is going to be a cool book. Anything about that area in Cambodia is very cool. I think a lot of people think it's in, oh, it's by Thames and Hudson. Yeah, so this is going to be more art focused, I think. Okay. We got one. It's the Oxford Companion to French Literature. Of course, you know, anything you want to know about a specific time period or thought, these are like collections of essays. They can be used as literary tools to enhance your understanding of a certain work, especially for each language. They have one for German, Italian, French, and so forth, because Oxford and Cambridge, of course, are very prominent sort of schools, and their influence is widely felt. Okay. Let's see, I don't want to mix these up. I also like to find these cool biographies. One is about Stephen A. Douglas, which I'm not a big fan of Douglas as a historical figure, but he's an important role in his debates with Abraham Lincoln. So this is a nice volume here. It's published by Oxford and by, let's see, Robert W. Johansen in 1973. Oh, pretty cool. If I haven't mentioned it before, yeah, any of these books you're interested in, feel free to leave a comment or direct message me. But I feel I take upon this study of intellectual pursuits. I usually will keep a good amount of books for myself, but then there's some books where it's out of my wheelhouse, or I know that I can access it at a university or public library, so I like to move it on to someone else who wants it for their public collection. Because at this point, I'm kind of at about somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 books. So because of space limitations, I'm trying to keep the stuff that's very essential. And so for me, it's science fiction books, history books, language books. Those are kind of my like three major things. And then I also collect, I guess, Japanese literature, you know, and probably, let's see, probably French, German to a certain extent. But in my mind, I don't decipher it that way. I just say it's fiction, but those are kind of like my main focuses. So this was really cool. It's called The Teaching Botanist. It's from by Garong, and it was published in 1900. It's just an amazing book, very good condition, and I actually had something, a little artifact here, which I thought was cool. It was a Southwest Student Conference from Hollister, Missouri, but look at the date, if you can see this. Whoop, excuse me. The date of that pamphlet. June 4th to 14th, 1929. So this is before the stock market crash and the Great Depression officially started. So that's pretty neat. And just amazing sort of things. Now, there's some annotations in this, but considering how old this is, and it has illustrations, and let me see if I can show this without hurting the spine. Let me pull it out. So, like this. Very interesting. Okay. There. Different illustrations. Different things, diagram, and it gives you this so you can learn how to identify plants at a more rigorous level than you would encounter before this time, because a lot of the herbals were kind of like books about how to be witches or like historical works, but this would be more of a scientific, practical, hands-on kind of book. Okay, here's a book that was pretty cool: American Diplomacy during the First World War, the Wilson administration, and to a lesser extent the Taft administration before it, that would have discussed issues of concern. Because, I mean, even back when Theodore Roosevelt was president, there was a lot of talk about, Bismarck before, then Kaiser Wilhelm I, then after him, Wilhelm II, and he had been building up a navy and ready for combat, and warfare, and thus the Americans were paying attention, but we were trying not to get involved. Although, if you note, the Americans were getting more involved overall in world affairs. Theodore Roosevelt himself helped negotiate the treaty for the Sino-Japanese War. Not Sino-Japanese War, the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. And so, very interesting time period. This was a treasure, I felt. This is very interesting. So I have 2 volumes here, and these are Gregory the Great, His Place in History and Thought. And it has some weird issues, but it's just amazing. These books are from 1905. I mean, they're in very good condition compared to a lot of surviving work from that time period. Just amazing. I mean, if you look at just some of the things, and it's amazing. This book was getting checked out up until fairly recently, actually, maybe 15 years ago, at least based off the library stamping. So, very cool. I don't know about the content when it comes to the historiography of it, but yeah, this is just the page it would keep to protect it. Show you Gregory the Great. Awesome. Very cool stuff. Especially, I believe he was very prominent in Orthodox history. Now, from relatively speaking, from like Cyril the Great, and Cyril, the person who created the Cyrillic script, to further, I cannot judge. I'm not an expert on that topic, but he definitely is a prominent individual, of course, with the epitaph the Great. So for those who are interested in religious or Christianity in general, very cool. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm going to cut this off. I actually have another video I'm going to record related to the same sort of picks. And from the books I showed you thus far, I think it was, 3, 6, 7, 10, so 15, 16, roughly about. I mean, I get a pretty good deal on it, so I'm willing to negotiate or talk talk about things because I don't have a lot at stake in it. So, all right, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.